Lee Key Yates, daughter of a Laguna Pueblo chief, was photographed around 1905. Her traditional attire, featuring a belt and beaded necklaces, marks ceremonial identities. The scene is set in the semi-arid west-central region of New Mexico, near Albuquerque, when railroads were beginning to integrate markets and cultures. An image from 1908, attributed to Roland Reed, shows a woman of the Ojibwe people. At the turn of the 20th century, Ojibwe communities lived among the Great Lakes, following seasonal cycles of fishing, gathering, and creating birch bark and beadwork arts. The photograph highlights cultural continuity and the encounter with the technical modernity of the time. Don't forget to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Carl Wurz's photograph, taken in 1900 in Arizona, shows two young women by a window. Their rolled hairstyles indicate youth and specific social roles. At the turn of the century, villages on the mesas of the Colorado Plateau welcomed artists, traders, and travelers. Their gazes reflect an awareness of that. Approaching World. An 1878 image from Fort Keogh in the Montana Territory features a Cheyenne woman. The fort, established after the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 under Nelson Miles's campaign, anchored the Army's presence on the plains. In this setting, the Cheyenne and Algonquian-speaking people, allied with the Lakota and Arapaho, faced displacement while striving to maintain their traditions. The scene presents Carlotta Chiwi and her daughters, Maria and Felicita Tura, women of Isleta Pueblo, photographed in the early 20th century and attributed to Poli. It is set in the U.S. Southwest when New Mexico was transitioning from territory to statehood in 1912. The framing emphasizes kinship and the strong female presence in Tewa community. Life. An image of a young Hopi girl from Saikatki on First Mesa, Arizona, was taken by Frederick Monson in the first decades of the 20th century. She wears ceremonial attire tied to the agricultural cycle and village celebrations. The scene reflects a period of change in the Southwest, evidencing cultural continuity. An 1895 photograph shows a young woman of Taos Pueblo in present-day New Mexico. Between adobe walls, signs of daily tasks blend with the long history of the Pueblo, inhabited for centuries by Tewa-speaking peoples. A crossroads of trade routes in the upper Rio Grande since pre-colonial times. Its multi-story houses reflect communal architecture. In an 1892 image, a young Kiowa woman is captured in an everyday moment alongside her community. Her garments, adorned with beads and textiles adopted during the period, indicate exchanges with settlers and plains trade. Her focused gaze and adornments reveal youthful roles and ritual practices that sustained Kiowa life at the end of the 19th century. A woman of the Spokane Nation, photographed in 1897 by Frank LaRoche, is shown with clothing and accessories reflecting practices of the Columbia Plateau. The moment captures a period of intense change in the Pacific Northwest, when railroads and new economies were asserting themselves, yet community life maintained rituals, beadwork, and basketry. A 1904 photograph from present-day New Mexico depicts the Corn Maiden, a mythic figure among the Pueblo peoples. At the turn of the 20th century, the scene underscores the centrality of corn as daily food, a guide to the agricultural calendar, and a ritual offering. The image illuminates ties between myths, labor, and community life in the Southwest. In 1900, Carl Everton Moon began a photographic project visiting Native American communities in their homelands. He sought to preserve their ways of life, rituals, landscapes, and histories at the turn of the 20th century, when westward expansion and new frontiers were rapidly altering the daily lives of these peoples. A woman of the Taos Pueblo, photographed in the 1880s in the territory of New Mexico, is shown wearing dark wool clothing, a shawl over her shoulders, turquoise necklaces, and a traditional hairstyle. In the background, Adobe houses indicate her communal role. Her expression suggests a daily life marked by rituals, trade, and agricultural seasonality. In the 1880s, Marcia Pascal, a woman of Cherokee descent and daughter of George Pascal, an officer in the U.S. Army, stood out. Her trajectory crosses the post-Civil War phase, when westward expansion, railroads, and new legal frontiers were altering life in Indian Territory and mixed communities. In 1894, a Kiowa woman from the southern plains lived in what was then Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. After the Plains Wars and the imposition of boundaries, her community faced economic and spiritual changes that strained ceremonies, language, and family roles previously reinforced by regional alliances. In 1900, in the United States, a young, indigenous woman appears in the ceremonial dress of her nation. The scene is set at the turn of the 20th century, when Native communities faced territorial losses and redefinitions of autonomy. Her clothing and adornments affirm collective bonds and cultural continuity in the face of rapid transformations. An 1899 photograph by Frank Reinhardt presents Hattie Tom, an Apache woman. The scene, set at the end of the 19th century, reflects a phase of reconfiguration in the American West and the assertion of indigenous identities under new civil powers. The framing and adornments indicate cultural choices and ways of presenting oneself to the world. Elsie Vance Chestwin, connected to the Chiricahua Apache, is part of the Southwest's Apache history at the end of the 19th century. Amid military campaigns and displacement, the clans preserved kinship, alliances, and subsistence routes. Her name evokes memories of imprisonment, removals, and contact with Army posts on the U.S.-Mexico border. In an 1886 image, Lizzie Longwolf performs in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, part of the tours that shaped public memory of the frontier. Her participation highlights how these shows combined equestrian demonstrations, exhibition shooting, and choreographies to sell a narrative of the West to the public. A 1895 image presents a young Hopi woman of the Pueblo people living on the mesas of Arizona. Her clothing and adornments indicate family belonging and life stage. At the end of the 19th century, contacts with railroads, merchants, and scholars were growing, while seasonal ceremonies continued to mark the community calendar. In 1899, Frank Reinhardt photographed Hattie Tom, a Chiricahua Apache woman. The image, made in the context of final ethnographic interest, reveals adornments, hairstyle, and textiles that showcase the group's techniques and identities. Her serene posture echoes memories of displacement and alliances after the Apache Wars. In 1886, image shows Isabel Perico Njedi, a Chiricahua Apache woman held as a prisoner of war. The setting evokes the end of the campaigns in the U.S. Southwest, when the capture of Apache groups accompanied the surrender of Geronimo. Her presence underscores the effects of military advances and territorial occupation on indigenous peoples. Around 1900, an image shows Alice, possibly connected to the Cayuse, Walla Walla, or Umatilla peoples of the Columbia Plateau. Her facial features, attire, and adornments suggest cultural affiliation. The period was marked by treaties, displacement, and territorial reconfigurations in the Pacific Northwest. Dated 1885, an image shows a young Comanche woman. Her hairstyle, beads, and textiles indicate craft practices and commercial contact in the southern Great Plains. The period follows the decline of the bison and settlement in bounded territories, a context that altered mobility, clothing, and modes of subsistence. Dated 1900, an image shows a young woman on her wedding day. The setting underscores rites that joined families and clans in the villages of the Arizona Plateau. Her woven garments, along with shell and turquoise adornments, express inherited crafts, while the hairstyle and textiles mark the passage into adulthood and the continuity of the community. In an 1886 image, Julie Nelson is glimpsed dressed according to the social codes of the late 19th century. Her attire, hair arrangement, and posture reflect expectations of respectability amid urbanization and industrial expansion. Her look and pose suggest control and self-awareness before the camera of the period. In 1895, George Addison painted Amy and Carrie Kiowa, placing two figures on Kiowa Island off the coast of South Carolina. In the post-Reconstruction era, when barrier islands connected fishing and cotton, the scene highlights clothing, posture, and objects linking local lives to tides and coastal commerce, with an attentive look at materiality and environment. In the 1880s, young Comanche women stood out as central agents of collective life, responsible for preparing food, setting up and leading camps, working leather, and managing exchanges. They sustained mobile economic networks tied to buffalo hunting and regional trade. They transmitted languages, songs, and rituals, articulating kinship and alliances. Their actions shaped cultural continuities in a period of rapid change on the plains.